Tonight, tariff whiplash and what it means for you. President Trump sending mixed messages on his tariff policy, signaling tariffs could go down with China again as the stock market starts to stabilize. And the late reporting on a shouting match in the West Wing involving Elon Musk. Bells tolling at the Vatican as cardinals and priests escort Pope Francis's body in an open coffin to St. Peter's Basilica, where he will now lie in state until his funeral on Saturday. More than 25,000 mourners from around the world are expected. Back here at home, the wildfire forcing evacuations not on the West Coast, instead in the heart of the East Coast. The air quality concerns tonight and what firefighters fear will happen unless it rains soon. The push to make our food healthier. The FDA commissioner joins us why he thinks removing food dyes is the way to go. It's the home of an iconic plant, and tonight the community surrounding the Goodyear plant is rattled by concerns about chemical emissions, and some who work there believe the factory is to blame for their health struggles.
I got to come back here in probably 3 or 4 weeks and start chemo and do chemo, and I do not want to do that.
And our look at what could be an environmentally sustainable way of addressing the nation's affordable housing crisis, a fully printed home.
This is BioHome 3D, the world's first all-bio-based 3D printed home.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Juju Chang in for Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with easing tensions in the trade war with China and what it could mean for you. The president saying talks with China are active, telling reporters this morning we are going to have a fair deal with China, though he did not provide any details. Tariffs on China remain at a whopping 145%. Tonight, both countries are signaling a readiness to negotiate, though China has accused the United States of economic bullying. The Chinese Foreign Ministry warning the U.S. should stop making threats and resorting to coercion. The president has walked back his threat to fire Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, who he denounced as a, quote, major loser after Powell didn't lower interest rates. The stock market rallying at the news after suffering its worst April in more than half a century and dire warnings of a recession. Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl starts us off tonight from the White House.
Tonight, a big shift in tone from the White House and questions about whether President Trump is preparing to back down in his trade war with China, as both sides signal they're ready to talk.
We are going to have a fair deal with China. It's going to be fair.
Are you talking to them actively now?
Actively. Everything's active.
China has been defiant since President Trump imposed a staggering 145% tariff on all Chinese goods imported to the United States. But today, a spokesperson for the Chinese government said China does not want a trade war. We will fight if we must, he said. Our doors are open if the U.S. wants to talk. If a negotiated solution is truly what the U.S. wants, it should stop threatening and blackmailing China. President Trump's tariffs have rattled the economy, the stock market having its worst April in more than a half century. Fears of inflation and recession. Monday, representatives from Walmart, Target, and Home Depot met with President Trump, warning his tariffs would soon cause empty store shelves in the U.S. A new poll shows anxiety among Americans. Just 37% approve of Trump's handling of the economy, an issue at the heart of his campaign and a big part of his win in November. The message today from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reflecting a shift from the talk of a trade war.
I wish to be clear, America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, it is a call for deeper collaboration and mutual respect among trade partners.
Secretary Bessent echoing the words of Joe Biden's Treasury Secretary.
America first must never mean America alone.
Tonight, the president was asked if he is ready to cut his 145% tariffs on China, which his Treasury Secretary acknowledged amounts to a trade embargo.
How soon do you want to bring the tariffs on Chinese goods
Well,
down?
that depends on them.
And John Karl joins us now from the White House. John, lots of mixed signals here. What are you hearing from your sources about the back and forth with China? Are Trump and Xi talking?
Ooh, that is a very good question, Juju. President Trump has implied that he has talked to President Xi. In fact, Rachel Scott last week asked him directly if President Xi reached out after the tariffs were imposed. And Trump said it's pretty obvious that it would be yes, but he didn't directly answer the question. He's spoken about how he has a great relationship with President Xi. So today I asked the White House, and I also asked the Chinese embassy in Washington very directly, have the two men spoken since the tariffs have been imposed? And no answer from either side, at least not yet. So intriguing question. Are there actual talks underway between the two leaders?
And will there be movement? John Carl, thank you as always.
Thank you, Juju.
Crowds from around the world are making their way to the Vatican to say goodbye to Pope Francis as we learn new details about his funeral on Saturday morning. Bells tolled today as the Pope's open coffin was carried across St. Peter's Square. The People's Pope carried to rest at the front of the Basilica. At his request, his coffin was placed at ground level, not elevated on a pedestal. More than 25,000 filing past his coffin to pay their respects. Chief International Correspondent James Longman is at the Vatican.
By the tens of thousands tonight, they came to see Pope Francis one last time, to say goodbye. More than 25,000 people from all walks of life waiting for hours in massive lines to honour the People's Pope. Francis lying in state in his simple wooden coffin, a stark contrast to the gilded splendour of St. Peter's Basilica.
The great mission of Pope Francis' life was to take the message from the church, go out into the world and meet people where they are. Well, now thousands of people have come to meet him as he lies in rest at St. Peter's Basilica, and they're coming from all over the world. Young, old, entire families are lining up, and they know that they are part of history now.
The day began with this solemn ceremony, led by Cardinal Kevin Farrell, a former Dallas bishop.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.
Some of the very cardinals who will choose the next pope joining bishops and the papal Swiss Guard as white-gloved pallbearers carried Francis on their shoulders from his residence to the basilica. Slowly winding through St. Peter's Square, the crowd of thousands applauding. This pope wanted them close. The procession taking a similar route Francis took on his last ride in the Popemobile on Easter Sunday, finally making its way inside. His coffin carefully placed in front of the altar facing the pews, not on an elevated stand or on a board like past pontiffs. In a church full of ancient symbolism, Francis knew the power of this simple act of humility. Yannick from Quebec waiting nearly 4 hours to see him.
I feel like it's someone from my family, and I don't know why, because I really don't know him a lot, you understand? But I don't know why, I just feel, in French I will say, je suis émue.
She was clearly moved.
Yeah, I don't know why.
In your eyes.
I don't know why, because I love the way he was, you see, and that way of trying to put people together, that was great for me.
We met Lissy from North Carolina.
How did you feel when you were in front of him?
So blessed.
Really?
So blessed and so happy.
Late today, the cardinals meeting at the Vatican, acknowledging they'll be meeting every day. Their next big task, the conclave. More than 100 cardinals will choose the next pope. Francis appointed 80% of them. Francis has kept some traditions. When he's buried in St. Mary Major, he will wear his pallium, a scarf-like garment and a symbol of his status as a good shepherd. A bag of coins featuring his portrait and a document summarising his papacy will be buried with him, both to identify him and his extraordinary work. But his other wish was just to have the name Franciscus on his plain tomb. Tonight, Francis lies in his simple wooden coffin in a basilica built to celebrate the history and wealth of the church. These competing forces, reform or tradition, now occupy the minds of the cardinals who must choose his successor.
And James joins us now from the Vatican. James, you reported that the cardinals will be meeting daily to discuss the future of the church. When is the earliest the conclave could begin, and how long do you think it'll take before a new pope is chosen?
Well, Juju, they have scheduled multiple days of mourning, 9 days of mourning, in fact, and on every single one of those days there are going to be events. So the earliest possible day will be May 5th. But remember, these cardinals come from all over the world. This is the most diverse conclave there has ever been. So they need time to get to know each other, pure and simple. As for a decision itself, well, at the moment we will all see that white smoke rising over the Sistine Chapel. With Francis, it took 2 days. This time we have no idea, of course, but we'll all be watching, covering it live here in Rome.
A lot of variables, and we'll be following your reporting, James. Thank you. And ABC's full live coverage of Pope Francis's funeral begins bright and early at 3:30 a.m. Saturday morning. World News Tonight anchor David Muir will lead our team from the Vatican, and of course, we'll be there for the conclave as well. Now to the state of emergency and the air quality alerts as a major wildfire burns in Ocean County, New Jersey. Trevor Alt has the story.
Tonight, a state of emergency in southern New Jersey, an explosive wildfire tripling in size in less than 24 hours.
This could very well end up being the largest wildfire in New Jersey in 20 years.
The Jones Road fire, reported around 9:45 Tuesday morning, about 90 miles south of New York City in Barnegat Township, quickly spreading to neighboring communities.
We're gonna lose this.
Volunteer firefighter Mike Berger shooting this video on the scene. The flames jumping the Garden State Parkway during rush hour, officials forced to shut it down for miles overnight. This commercial building left in ruins, and authorities cutting power to some 25,000 homes and businesses.
This fire right now is staying low to the ground. It's burning down in the brush. These are all the pine barrens down here, so there's plenty of fuel to make this fire burn.
3,000 people forced to flee.
The authorities were knocking on everyone's door, letting us know to evacuate.
Yanira Luna, one of many making use of emergency shelters. In just over a day, the Jones Road fire destroying 12,500 acres.
Our thanks to Trevor Alt. Jurors heard dramatic testimony at the retrial of Karen Reed in Massachusetts. She's accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend with her car and then leaving him to die in the snow. Today, the officer's mother took the stand. Here's Matt Gutman.
The Commonwealth calls Peggy O'Keefe.
Today, gut-wrenching testimony at the second murder trial of Karen Reed, the former professor accused of backing her SUV into her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and leaving him to die in a blizzard. More than 3 years after losing her son, Peggy O'Keefe breaking her silence, recalling the moment she saw his battered body in the hospital.
He was bruised up, his eyes were closed. It's just not a good scene.
Peggy testified the defendant, Karen Reed, shouted at her in that hospital hallway.
I hear Karen Reed yell, "Peg, is he dead? Is he dead, Peg? Peg, is he dead?"
John O'Keefe's mom says Karen told her she dropped him off at a party.
She said, we went to a party. I left him there. I said, you just left him there?
But the defense claims Karen didn't kill John. They say he was killed after she dropped him off at the home of another cop. And today, one of John O'Keefe's oldest friends, Carrie Roberts, who drove Karen to help search for him, grilled by Reed's defense attorney.
Did you lie?
I did not intentionally. I said I misunderstood the question, Mr. Jackson.
The case has divided the town of Canton. Neighbors have taken sides. And key witnesses like Carrie Roberts, one of John's oldest friends, speaking exclusively to GMA, saying they've been harassed and threatened. For the crime of?
Telling the truth. It's my friend. I'm not going to not help. It's all about which side are you on. We're John's closest friends and family, and we haven't been able to grieve because of all of this. It's all lost on this circus.
Our thanks to Matt Gutman. Secretary of Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and FDA Commissioner Marty McCary announced bold plans this week to remove certain food dyes from the U.S. food supply, pledging to phase out 8 artificial food dyes by the end of next year. It's all part of a broader focus on the health of America's children. And we're grateful to have FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty McCary here with us now to talk about these plans. Thanks so much, Dr. McCary.
Good to be with you.
So, announcing these plans, you said American children have been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals for the last 50 years. Outline for us, if you will, the specifics of the petroleum-based food dyes you're targeting now and why.
Well, there are 8 petroleum-based food colorings, and they have no taste, they have no nutritional value whatsoever. They simply provide that vibrant color, making ultra-processed food more attractive to children. There's been studies showing how it messes with the mind of a developing child where they feel full but still are attracted to eating more food with these vibrant colors. And there's been associations with attention deficit disorder and with at least one of the dyes in association with cancer. We've got a chronic disease epidemic. 1 in 7 boys now has attention deficit disorder, and 40% of American kids have a diagnosed chronic medical condition. So we've got to do something. No one ingredient in the food supply accounts for this chronic disease epidemic, but removing them will take out one instigating potential factor that has been shown in at least one major randomized controlled trial to be directly associated with attention deficit disorder. More medications is not the answer. We've got to look at the root causes of some of these childhood chronic conditions.
I think there are a lot of parents out there that would agree with you. And now you've said you plan to work with the food industry rather than formalize regulations. But food companies have made these pledges to remove food dyes before. In fact, General Mills did so in 2015, only to then add them back 2 years later, saying that consumers wanted the bright colors. Are you concerned that you may need a statute or some congressional action to make these changes stick?
Well, we are going to certainly use the entire toolbox of statutory and regulatory authorities that we have as a Food and Drug Administration. But I believe you win more bees with honey than with fire. So we're starting by working in a collaborative fashion, outlining a time frame and a national standard. Because, look, food companies are run by good people, and they have kids too. And they are now recognizing that they don't want to deal with a patchwork of different laws in 30 different states. They want a national standard and a national time frame, and they want to just make sure that their food manufacturing competitors are not getting an unfair advantage.
And so from a regulatory perspective, what exactly is in your power to enforce it in case, you don't get the commitments from the companies? And what would the timeline on that be?
So, look, by the end of next year, we'd like to see these ingredients replaced. We are simply asking American food companies to remove these petroleum-based food colorings and replace them with natural ingredients for American children, as they already are doing for children in Europe and Canada. So this is feasible. There's a model. There's a precedent. There is no increase in food prices when this happens, and there's massive consumer demand.
Now, I want to, while we have you here, ask you, as part of the Trump administration's effort to shrink the federal workforce, some 20,000 employees were terminated from the Department of Health and Human Services. That includes, of course, your FDA. And earlier this month, the top vaccine regulator from the FDA, Dr. Peter Marks, resigned, citing, quote, misinformation and lies underpinning HHS Secretary Kennedy's approach to vaccines. Dr. Marks has warned that climbing measles cases, that the U.S. is at risk of losing its measles elimination status, calling the FDA response tepid. As a doctor yourself, do you encourage Americans to get their measles vaccine?
Well, look, I believe vaccines save lives, and I believe any death from a vaccine-preventable illness is a tragedy. I've been very clear about that. But let me address your question, because it's a very important question. The federal health agencies, along with the rest of the government, have become massively bloated. And so the goal has been to reduce the size back to 2019 levels. If you go back to 2006, the FDA had about 9,000 employees. Just a few months ago, it was 19,000 employees. So any discussions of cuts at the FDA should mention the context that the headcount of number of employees at the FDA has doubled. It's increased by 100% since 2006. We got to do our job more efficiently. It's also important to note that no layoffs or cuts were made to scientists or inspectors. These were IT folks, communication staff. I can't tell you how many people have the word strategy in their title. We had over 100 communication staff. We had silos with duplicative IT services. And so we're consolidating a lot of those services. And I think the FDA will be a lot stronger because of it. And with regards to that doctor that you mentioned who resigned before I came into office at the FDA, the irony is he forced out the top 2 vaccine experts at the FDA, Drs. Gruber and Krauss, when they disagreed with him about the COVID booster in children. And that all came out in a House Judiciary hearing last summer. So there's a bit of an irony in his resignation.
FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Now, the White House is hearing proposals in its effort to encourage Americans to have more kids. One proposal the Trump administration is considering is awarding a $5,000 baby bonus to every American mother after she gives birth, as reported by the New York Times. Another would create a government fund to educate women on their menstrual cycles and fertility. Critics say the government should instead focus on offering more support for mothers and new parents. Coming up, a terrifyingly close call for a grandmother and her grandchildren. And a community raising concerns about chemical emissions caused by a Goodyear plant, what they fear it could be doing to their health. Goodyear. You've almost certainly heard of the iconic brand, but what you probably haven't heard of is one of its factories and concerns about potential health impacts in the surrounding neighborhood. Tonight, as we continue our Earth Week coverage, ABC News Investigates takes us there to find out what's happening on the ground. We hear from people who say their lives have been changed forever. Aaron Katursky has tonight's prime focus.
Early morning in Niagara Falls, New York, a neighborhood where industry weaves among family homes. As the community wakes, it's shift change at one of the area's remaining factories. For decades, Goodyear has been one of the local mainstays, a place to make an honest living, says retiree Harry Wiest.
When did you start working at Goodyear?
December of 1977. It was a good job. We played jokes at each other, went to football games. We were really a tight-knit bunch.
Goodyear, one of the world's biggest tire makers. A big player on the racing circuit. Known around the world for its iconic symbol of Americana, the Goodyear blimp. For more than 30 years, Harry clocked in at the Niagara plant, where one of the jobs is making a chemical additive then sent to other factories to produce the Goodyear tires. Harry was still on the job in 2004 when he noticed something wrong.
I went into the doctor because I was having trouble peeing. He says, "Where do you work?" I said, "I work at Goodyear." He's like, "Oh boy, I got a lot of paying customers. I got a lot of patients from Goodyear."
The doctor delivering tough news.
I'm case number 37 of this Goodyear bladder cancer thing.
What do you mean you're case 37?
Well, at Goodyear, we have had so many cases.
Just a short drive from the midst of those world-famous falls, the Goodyear factory remains operational today. What happened beyond those walls, under those stacks, has been the subject of investigation for decades.
Early 80s, mid-80s, started hearing about a number of people who had worked there or who worked there that were getting bladder cancer.
We had a nickname for it, and it was called the Ginch. And they say, "Hey, you got the Ginch."
And then we started doing some research, started asking some questions.
One chemical used by workers at the plant to keep those tires from cracking came under scrutiny, something called orthotoluidine.
Probably most people have never heard of it before.
Attorney Steve Wadka, now retired, spent years representing dozens of Goodyear workers with bladder or related cancer, including Harry.
The suppliers, the manufacturers of the orthotoluidine, had much more knowledge about the carcinogenicity of orthotoluidine than Goodyear had.
Most of those cases settled out of court with the chemical manufacturers, but questions did arise. Who knew what, when?
And through some fact-finding and investigation, found out that Goodyear had been notified previously that we were working with a product that could cause bladder cancer.
Jim Briggs worked at Goodyear for 18 years. At the time, he was on the executive board.
But they had never said nothing to us.
Harry says he, too, was never warned.
No one ever said to you, "Hey, this stuff could be toxic, this could be bad for you."
They didn't.
In a statement, Goodyear said orthotoluidine exposure levels in Goodyear's Niagara Falls plant have historically and consistently been far lower than the standards set by government regulators. When Goodyear learned of concerns associated with the use of orthotoluidine, the company put additional engineering controls in place to further reduce exposure. A federal agency called NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, began examining worker exposures at the factory in the late 1980s. A study in 2014 identified at least 50 workers with bladder cancer, and while doctors can't say with certainty that any one toxin caused someone's cancer, The study estimated exposed workers had a 3 times higher risk of developing bladder cancer compared to the average person in New York. Goodyear says it regularly performs industrial health sampling and monitoring in this facility and tracks current bladder cancer cases through its workers' compensation program. There is now a screening program for all employees, active and former, and current workers are tested every 6 months to measure pre- and post-shift levels of orthotoluidine.
And it shows generally that there's an increase in their post-shift levels, meaning that they're absorbing it into their bodies.
It's come down. Why isn't that acceptable?
It needs to come down further.
The goal should be 0, and that's what we're shooting for.
Riggs retired and went to work with the United Steelworkers Union, which continues to work with Goodyear on health and safety controls.
When people are hired, we tell them this is a risk here. We want people to know. We want them to be informed.
Bladder cancer cases, he says, have dropped off in employees hired after 1990.
I see the work we're doing, and I definitely feel the workers there today are far more safer than I was and the people before me that went to work at Goodyear.
And what happened here, he hopes, is a cautionary tale.
I'm hearing about a lot of regulations going away, and I'm hoping we're not going to get back to that culture because it's scary. I lived it. When you get back to the culture where nobody's got to report, nobody's got to monitor, nobody's got to be regulated, it's not good for the American people, whether it's at Goodyear or anywhere else.
Today, Niagara Falls looks nothing like a one-time booming industrial heartland for the Northeast. Now this community is a shell of what it was. As industry packed up and left, people moved away. Goodyear has been a lasting presence in this area for a long time. Can you believe you're still standing here in your retirement talking about this?
It's what happens. I wasn't successful during my active career of getting everything done, so here I am.
The federal NIOSH study examined the risk to workers inside the plant, but Wadka today is also worried about what could be happening outside.
The workers might know what the risk is, but the people in the community, they have no choice.
And just months ago, Wadka obtained a map from New York State modeling some areas near the plant exposed to emissions up to 7 times New York's annual guideline concentration of orthotoluidine, a chemical now declared a known human carcinogen.
People are very concerned. For the 7 News I-Team, I'm Ed Dranch.
Ed Dranch is an investigative reporter for WKBW in Buffalo. He sat down with the state.
It's not the actual real-world scenario that we're seeing play out here.
New York saying the map doesn't accurately portray the risk level to the community because it was developed with a worst-case scenario, assuming the plant used the chemical 365 days a year, when in reality it operates on a batch production rotation. And it says orthotoluidine emissions from the Goodyear factory are within current state ambient air guidelines, which are more stringent than federal risk thresholds.
Based on the evidence that I've seen and in review with our air quality experts and the New York State Department of Health, there is no risk to the community.
When I asked, is there real-world scenario mapping, the answer is no. So they really have no idea how much of this chemical is being emitted into the air. They only have estimates, and that is of little comfort.
A previous state project that mapped cancer data over 5 years showed the Goodyear facility within a broad area of higher than expected bladder cancer incidence. But the New York Department of Health said this study did not account for other factors that could explain the higher rate, such as smoking, a major driver of bladder cancer, or the possibility sickened Goodyear workers living in the local area affected the numbers. The Department of Health said based on its review of the state's air modeling, potential emissions represent a low risk to the community. Goodyear said its Niagara factory produces low levels of orthotoluidine emissions and is in full compliance with its permit requirements, adding the health and safety of our associates and the communities in which we work is our top priority. For Harry Wiest and his family, the battle continues.
Lord, we ask that you would watch over this family as we get on through life. Amen. All right.
Harry's father-in-law, Ray Klein, was also a longtime Goodyear worker, another one of the unlucky ones who fell ill.
Dad has been through cancer, bladder cancer, 3 times. It came back after 25 years.
Wow.
And Harry recently learning his cancer is back.
So you've been living with this
For years. 21 years, and I've had it 5 times. And I got to come back here in probably 3 or 4 weeks and start chemo. And I do not want to do that.
It's unrelenting.
It is unrelenting, and it's tough because it always brings all this stuff back, you know. Many a time I come down this road on 56th Street, oh my goodness. We worked so many hours.
Harry says he's not giving up. Today, paying his respects to a Goodyear co-worker who lost his cancer battle.
People don't realize the devastation. He had a daughter, had grandkids, such a blow to the family.
The graveyard nearly framing the factory in the distance.
I can see the steam coming out of the stacks. Just so full of irony that he is here. And Goodyear is just right down the street.
Aaron Katursky, thank you. New York State reiterated to ABC News that there is no imminent public health risk to the community from Goodyear's emissions. The Goodyear company is currently applying for a new state air permit, and as part of that process has recently installed interim pollution control measures at the factory to reduce orthotoluidine emissions. Permanent controls are expected to reduce further emissions and should be in place by October 2026. Coming up, views of the movie Conclave are soaring, but how does the actual conclave work? We go by the numbers. And the Fire Festival saga continues, what Billy McFarland is doing now. The eyes of the world are on the Vatican, and they'll stay there for a while. After Pope Francis's funeral, the focus will turn to selecting a new pontiff. That centers around the conclave, a secretive, centuries-old tradition we're checking out by the numbers. The election of a new pope usually begins 15 to 20 days after one dies, though it can happen earlier if all the cardinals are there. Not every cardinal can vote. Those who choose the next pope must be younger than 80 years old. And of the 252 cardinals at the time of Francis's death, 135 are electors, and he appointed 108 of them. The process has happened behind closed doors since the year 1271. And despite all the secrecy, we know more about how conclaves work than ever. Hollywood's the reason for that. Viewership of the 2024 Oscar-winning film Conclave spiked 283% on Monday following news that the Pope had died. Starring Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow, the papal thriller about power-hungry cardinals surged to 6.9 million minutes streamed and was #1 at the Apple Movie Store. Conclave has been praised for its details and its accuracy. But once the Sistine Chapel is locked with 252 cardinals inside, no one else knows for sure what's going on. While it's typically a cardinal who gets the job, technically any Roman Catholic male could be pope. So maybe Stanley Tucci still has a shot. Coming up, the first Fire Festival put its founder in prison. The sequel self-destructed. Now Billy McFarland's looking for a buyer who wants to make Firefest their problem instead. Details in the rundown. Plus, 3D printed homes breaking new ground all across America, the latest in the new technology, and how soon it could help solve the housing crisis. Next. And welcome back. Heart-stopping video shows a grandmother and her grandchildren barely escaping danger. An agreement is made between the city of Uvalde and families of school shooting victims. And who scammers are conning out of billions of dollars. These stories and more in tonight's rundown.
An attorney representing families of the 21 victims of the Robb Elementary School mass shooting says a settlement was reached between the families and the city of Uvalde. The exact terms of the settlement, which was approved unanimously at a city council meeting Tuesday, were not disclosed. When the lawsuit was filed, the families were looking for a monetary settlement as well as changes to the city's police department and a permanent memorial for the victims. A very close call for a woman and her grandchildren caught on video. Linsey Davis is seen pushing the children in a stroller down the street in Poughkeepsie, New York, when a manhole suddenly explodes right behind them.
I didn't know what to do except grab my grandson and run.
Davis also said another manhole exploded at the next corner as they tried to get away. The fire department found 3 ruptured manholes in one block. Luckily, no one was injured. A new FBI report says Americans ages 60 and up lost a staggering $4.8 billion to scammers last year. The Bureau's Internet Crime Report said Americans overall lost a record $16.6 billion to scammers, a 33% increase from 2023. The Bureau said victims of investment fraud reported the most losses. The European Union levied separate fines against Apple and Meta under its new Digital Markets Act. Apple was fined €500 million for restrictions that kept app makers from being able to point users to cheaper offers away from the App Store. Meta was fined €200 million for its advertising model, in which Facebook and Instagram users must choose between consenting to their personal data being combined or paying for an ad-free service. The Associated Press reported that both companies indicated they would appeal the fine. Florida police released video showing a suspected drunk driver crashing head-on into a patrol car. A Manatee County Sheriff's deputy was turning into a parking lot Monday night when a pickup truck veered into his lane and crashed into him, causing his car to roll over. The deputy was treated for minor injuries at the hospital, police say. The driver was also taken to the hospital, but then arrested on suspected DUI charges after police say taking a blood alcohol test. The Fire Festival brand is now for sale. Organizer Billy McFarland announced on Instagram that he was looking to sell the Fire trademarks, IP, and other assets. This comes a week after the planned Fire Festival 2 was indefinitely postponed. McFarland said in the same statement that a new possible location had been found for the event, but felt he needed to let a new team take over for the festival to succeed.
Climate change is supercharging many extreme weather events, and that's changing our relationship with where we live. And traditional construction with concrete, steel, and wood has a larger carbon footprint than many nations. But what if you didn't have to build a home, and instead you could assemble it like Legos or even print it? Well, it's already happening, and Chief Meteorologist Ginger Zee has the story.
It's warm and welcoming, it's energy efficient, highly customizable, and it has all the modern amenities that you'd expect. But it wasn't built, it was printed.
I've given a number of tours here, and every time people walk into this, is, wow, is this 3D printed? When can I get one?
And it could be a sustainable way of addressing the nation's affordable housing crisis.
This is BioHome 3D, the world's first all bio-based 3D printed home. It's made with wood residuals or wood waste from the sawmills in the state of Maine. We thought, how do we take that wood waste and turn it into something very valuable?
That something is this 600 square foot home that has endured 3 winters in Maine. And the team at the Advanced Structures and Composites Center at the University of Maine hope it's going to be the first of many across the country.
This is the printer or the conversion manufacturing cell we use to produce BioHome 3D.
Habib Dogger is the executive director of the center. He's been working on this kind of research for more than 2 decades.
We made it in 3 pieces, and the entryway here and the bathroom were printed in one piece. This bedroom was printed in another piece, and then the living room and kitchen area was printed in the 3rd piece. Notice here, as you look at the house, you see the brown 3D printed lines. So these are the lines of the 3D printer followed to print the house layer by layer.
The building and construction industry is the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, according to the UN. And its materials of choice, cement, steel, and aluminum, all have significant carbon footprints. But a printed biohome is made with just 2 basic ingredients: the wood waste of local sawmills and resin made from corn. By combining these 2 things together, the center creates pellets for its 3D printers.
So these pellets are fed right into the printer, they're heated, and they're extruded through a printer head. And that's how we produce this house layer by layer. Now, this material is what's 100% renewable because it is really bio-based.
The material can literally be reused over and over again. Say the homeowner no longer wants the house. The entire home can be broken down into those original pellets, which could then be used to print something else.
We've studied that, and we've done it 5 times over. So we've recycled it 5 times and looked at what happens to the properties. The good news is the properties hold up good enough, so there's so many applications for those materials.
Materials that doggers say are strong enough to meet Maine's housing requirements and survive Maine's challenging climate. The center outfitted the house with sensors so they can study how it's doing in the elements. Dogger says that 3 years in, the biohome is performing just like a normal house. They're just a lot faster to make.
The more machines you put in, the more you can produce. So it is actually very scalable.
It takes the center about a week to make a biohome, and Dogger says that Maine generates enough wood waste every year to produce 100,000 of them. Considering the scale of this nation's housing crisis, they're going to need all the homes they can print.
We have 7.1 million less affordable homes than we need for really vulnerable low-income people.
Kara Hay is the head of Panquish, a Maine nonprofit that's partnering with the university. They've secured funding to build 9 biohomes for those needing affordable housing. Dogger says scaling up production beyond that will require cooperation with the construction industry, who they'll need as partners.
The advantage of the technology from a cost perspective is that you reduce the amount of labor need, the amount of waste you need, and you can prefabricate everything in a controlled environment. This material is stronger than concrete in compression, yet you can drill through it, and it's 100% recyclable and renewable.
1, 2, 3!
Down in Florida, Renco, short for Renewable Composite, is also skipping the concrete. Instead, they're using giant Lego-like construction bricks to build apartments and houses. Molded from repurposed materials like glass fiber and resin, along with stone, the bricks interlock together using a rubber mallet and adhesive. The company, which just opened its first US-based factory, says that its bricks are stronger than concrete, rated to withstand a Cat 5 hurricane, and they're fire resistant. The new factory can produce enough bricks to make 7,000 houses or apartments per year. Renco completed an apartment complex in South Florida in 2023, a 96-unit complex finished in just 8 weeks.
So if you've ever played with Legos and you've got a child, say under 10 years old, and you've got those basic Lego kits, if you can do that, you can build an apartment building, you can build a house.
Back in Maine, the university is currently building a factory of the future. This will help them expand the sustainable manufacturing research. It will also help train a new generation of workers and collaborate with companies on 3D printing projects.
Right now, younger people across the United States are having a hard time finding homes. They can't afford the homes. Even if they existed, they couldn't afford them. And so this technology would be one tool in the tool shed, if you wish, to provide more housing for society.
Just fascinating. Our thanks to Ginger. And you can catch much more of Earth Week coverage in our ABC News Live special, Our Home, now streaming on Hulu. Stand-up comic Jessica Kirson has performed on comedy's biggest stages for over 2 decades. Crowds come for her insightful, honest, some would say biting inner monologues, the type of stuff most of us keep to ourselves, frankly. But Kirson says it out loud and boldly, and her latest exercise in self-deprecation is a Hulu special called Jessica Kirson, I'm the Man. Let's watch.
I almost blew up during COVID again. So I was like, I better do something. This is really true. So I joined Weight Watchers, where you download the app and it counts the points. The problem is I lie on it. I lie on my own app. And I'm the only one that sees it. Do you know how that is? The other day I had a pint of ice cream and I wrote down 1 baby carrot.
That's very funny and very true.
you.
Jessica Kirson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this is not your first rodeo, not your first special, and yet many are saying it's finally time for you to be getting the recognition you so justly deserve.
Yeah, I did one on another network, and they put it on once. Isn't that unbelievable?
Really?
Yeah, it's like if you didn't catch it that one time, then you're but then you had to pay for it. So then only one person watched it. So yeah, I'm really excited about this.
What's it like launching it into the world?
I love that question because not a lot of people have asked me that. It's heavy. Like it's weird. You know, like Friday, millions of people are going to see this. It goes across, I don't know how many countries, 150 countries. I think it's even more than that. So it's such a weird
That's
feeling.
like getting a giant report card.
Yeah.
Nerve-wracking. I think I
know.
did well. I'm pretty sure I did well.
Yeah, but you don't know unless you read the comments, which I try not to do.
Do you really want to be doing that? I mean, I know you're really savvy. You're like a 15-year-old on social media. All over your media savviness. Like, what does it mean to get all these millions of followers on TikTok and social media?
Well, first of all, this might sound corny, but I really do this to make people laugh. So and make people happy. I don't look at it like I'm getting more popular and things are going real. I really am glad that people are watching something that's making them laugh.
But it seems like you do a lot of internal excavation. Like I read that your mother was a shrink. She
still is, yeah.
Heading to shrinkage yourself. You were thinking of
shrinkage. I'm still heading
shrinking yourself. Exactly. But stand-up is hard. It's dangerous. How often do you have to like work up a joke before you tell it?
Oh, I mean, first of all, coming from a mother who's a therapist, being in therapy since I'm 8 years old and studying to be a therapist has helped me be, I think, a much better comic because I really understand people and I'm aware and I've worked on myself so hard. But also coming up with a joke is not easy. I think people think it's, I've been heckled before from some guy who's like, yeah, whatever, you suck, I could do it. And I'm like, really? Come up here.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done that. I've handed them, I'm like, do it. Come up here and tell a joke. It's very easy.
And yet you do that a lot. We talked about kibitzing. You kibitz with the audience. What are the dangers of doing that?
Well, in the beginning, when I first started doing it and wasn't like seasoned at doing it, it just wasn't funny a lot because it's weird to do stuff in the moment, but I got very good at it, of just improvising, doing things in the moment.
And, we talked about sort of the Freudian nature of what you talk about. You talk about your body issues, being a lesbian, like all the, the carrot joke is hysterical. Why is it important to you to lay out some of these personal issues?
The only comedy I've ever laughed at is comics who are honest, real, autonomous, like talk about themselves. I don't laugh at comics who just make fun of other people. They're not vulnerable. It's not funny to me. And it's easy. It's much harder to talk about yourself. But I want them to, I used to teach comedy and I would tell the comics, you want people to leave the show and go, I want to hang out with her. Most people are having a really hard time right now and have been for a long time. So it's more important for me to tell them I'm not doing well either in certain ways and you're not alone.
And I actually think that's why people are drawn to comedy, and especially yours.
Oh,
thanks so much for joining us. We're so glad you were able to make it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Jessica Kirson, I'm the Man, premieres this Friday, April 25th on Hulu, part of Hulu's new stand-up brand, Hularious. Get it? Which features the work of a new comedian every month, and she'll also be performing at Manhattan's Beacon Theater Friday night if you're in the hood. So that's our show for this hour. I'm Juju Chang. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks for streaming with us.